very clear at this point that something needs to change in the Pauper format. The format has been really aggressive for a very long time, with a Splitter Twin S combo at the top, Affinity and Burn taking over, and the format just being fast altogether. And honestly, if you were to ask me, I think it's a great time to get into Pauper. Similar to Legacy, I find broken metagames to be really great for new players because you tend to only have to learn 2 to 3, maybe even 4 matchups. Build your sideboard, try an archetype you want, and try and see if it works within that format. Maybe pick up a deck, and again, just learn those matchups. Some of those matchups are just going to be near impossible for you, so you might tune your sideboard a little bit to maybe edge that matchup out, or just build your sideboard more encompassing for the other 2 to 3 matchups that I was talking about and leave that 4th one alone. Again, it's a concise time to be playing a certain format, and that's what I like about Pauper, because it was a great time for me to personally explore different combo decks in the format. But with that in mind, it doesn't mean that needs to last forever. It's not the type of gameplay that everyone wants, and as people get into the format, ultimately they do want some type of change. They don't want speed all over. So in this video, I wanted to go over 3 bans that I think should happen in the Pauper format. Now, some of these bans are a little bit personal opinion. Some of them are a little bit informed based on some recent videos and content that have come out. So before we get into the video, let me know in the comment section down below, and feel free to edit it after the end of the video, what needs to get banned in the Pauper format. So let me know before watching, then maybe edit your response and maybe see if your mind changes or it kind of further solidifies. What needs to go in the Pauper format? What needs to change? What needs to be unbanned? Because that's not something I'm discussing today. I think the Pauper ban list is perfectly fine. But what do you think needs to change for this format to get better? Now, if you look at the metagame itself, as I was mentioning, it's very aggressive. Burn and Grixis Affinity only at 12%. Where we start to get a little bit weird is with Jund Broodscale and Golgari Broodscale. Technically, Broodscale is also at 12%. I would classify these archetypes as very closely together, whereas Jund Broodscale tends to be a little bit more mid-range with Writhing Chrysalis. Golgari Broodscale tends to be that more pure combo or like tempo combo deck type of spiel. I think these 3 decks will take up the majority of the top of your metagame. Now, there's a lot of archetypes that actually do manage to make their way to the top that do have a lot of variety. The big way to classify this, though, and I think someone that describes it really well is with Engine. So I think Patastis Nessis, I've done react to their videos before. I didn't specifically want to react to this because after watching it, I thought the video, you know, I disagree with some points, but I actually agree with a lot of it. So I highly recommend you check this video out, maybe after this video with me or before, and then come back here. But they did highlight some great points highlighting engines. And I actually do want to link an article down below in the description box from Alex Ullman, member of the Pauper format panel, talking about how engines do dominate Pauper. So very different from other formats where you tend to work with archetypes, aggro control, whatever. You tend to work around key cards, but those cards don't really mix too much between other archetypes. Pauper is dominated by key engines. So for example, the tapped artifact lands and wildfires. So you're able to target your own artifact land and ramp. Or you might think of something like Deadly Dispute and some type of artifact to be able to ramp you out. You might think of something like Lotus Petal and Dark Ritual for the combo matchups. You might think of different engines that different archetypes take advantage of to enable their plan. And so that is what ultimately defines Pauper. And so when we think about bans, we have to think about not only are we just banning the best deck in the format, but is that too much? Does that create too much shakeup, too much uncertainty, and would we rather promote stability? And that is another thing that this creator goes over as well, talking about promoting stability through data-driven methods. So some of the stuff in their video, I'm going to kind of highlight in my own video because I do agree with it, but I'm going to go over some other bits as well. So the very first card that I think we need to ban in the Pauper format is probably Deadly Dispute. I'm going to be honest here. This card does too much in comparison to what the other cards do. So in many ways, this card feels like 1 mana Ancestral. All right, and so let me clarify here. So 1 mana Ancestral, because if you take a look at some of the other archetypes we're playing, if you look at Grixis Affinity, the key interaction is with Ichor Wellspring. So Ichor Wellspring's 2 mana. When it enters, it draws a card, and then when it goes into the graveyard, you also draw a card. So that is the key thing that you're sacrificing to Deadly Dispute. The key with Deadly Dispute that makes it ancestral, quote unquote, is that you get a treasure token back. So you almost like you get a rebate on your mana. But the key to that mana is it could be 1 mana of any color. That also is another problem. This is what helps enable some of the 3-color shenanigans that exist in this format. And so if we take a comparison to this, so this 2 mana instant speed as an additional cost sacrifice something is actually a relatively common effect in the Pauper format. So if we kind of break it down to this, Altar's Reap and Costly Plunder tend to be the more common versions. Not seeing too much play because they just don't get the extra bits to it. For example, Costly Plunder, you're allowed to sacrifice an artifact or a creature to draw 2 cards. Sometimes you do want artifacts going into your graveyard. Altar's Reap only allows you to sacrifice a creature. But Deadly Dispute, again, artifact or creature, but you get a rebate, so you get an artifact back, which is key. So not only do you get a mana back, but you get a treasure, which is an artifact which helps your affinity count. You draw 2 cards. Eviscerator's Insight is nice as like an additional like copy number 5 and 6 of Deadly Dispute because you're able to flash it back in the mid-range strategies. Fanatical Offering sees a little less play. It is there. I mean, it creates a map token. I mean, okay, whatever. It creates a map token. Nasty End, largely not that significant, but if we were to introduce a legendary creature in the Pauper format, I feel like this actually is kind of interesting because again, there's no common legendary because you sacrifice a creature, not an artifact, but if the creature is legendary, you draw 3 cards. So there is a world in the future where if we introduced something legendary that's like pretty good, maybe a couple of them in one set, something like Nasty End could potentially be really good. Now, Reckoner's Bargain, as an additional cost to cast a spell, sacrifice an artifact or creature, you gain life equal to the sacrifice permanent's mana value, then draw 2 cards. So this card specifically sees play in the main board of affinity decks because it's a great anti-burn tool. You sacrifice like a Mirror Enforcer, you gain 7 life, you're going to be able to return that Mirror Enforcer through Blood Fountain anyway, and then you draw 2 cards. So again, copies 5 through 8 of something like Deadly Dispute, but the key is Deadly Dispute sees the play everywhere. Deadly Dispute ultimately has to go because you pay that 1 mana, you get it back, you get ramp, you get color fixing, you get an artifact which adds to your affinity count, and then it just becomes something else that you can like sacrifice or just again use down the line in future turns. It can act as ramp because if you keep that artifact around, now on turn 3 you're at 4, you're gonna be able to play Writhing Chrysalis, and then if you're at turn 5, you're gonna be able to play out the initiative card that comes out for 5. It's like green and 4, but regardless, Deadly Dispute does a lot. I feel like this is the engine that a lot of mid-range decks and a lot of black decks are abusing a little too easily, and it's that good notch down that I think needs to go, and is wildly different against the other cards in the format. The next card that I think needs to go is Refurbished Familiar. Now, Refurbished Familiar is absolutely a busted Magic card in the Pauper format. Look, it's only played in Affinity, okay? But in Affinity, it does everything. It is a 1 mana 2/1. Forget the 3 on it. It has affinity for artifacts. This is a 1 mana 2/1. It's got flying, and when Refurbished Familiar enters the battlefield, each opponent discards a card. And for each opponent who can't, you draw a card. That part of the text is absolutely wild. The key with affinity in Pauper, and especially throughout the years, but now in its current iteration with Grixis, and over time from the past couple of years with Grixis, is that affinity said, I will always be able to outgrind you. You need to present a faster clock than me. I will be able to outlast your removal. I will be able to outburn you. I will be able to outdraw you in every way, shape, or form. But I may not get there super fast. That is Grixis Affinity's game plan. It will always come out on top at the end. The problem is it doesn't have a good way to set that clock of what at the end is. So on an average card like draw, it's generally going to be able to get there in the long game. On a good draw, it's always going to beat you. It's always going to beat you. It's going to have the card draw. It's going to have the threats. It's always going to have more than you. So that is the thing with Affinity. When you're beating Affinity, you have to have your threats lined up, your game plan lined up. And if they miss on a singular draw, you should be able to tempo yourself out against Affinity. Refurbished Familiar completely stops that. Refurbished Familiar is always a 2-for-1. Refurbished Familiar comes down, forces your opponent to discard a card. But then to get rid of it, they have to spend a removal spell. So then it's a 2-for-1. But oh, Chef, why would you want to get rid of it? Because the damn thing is flying. It actually trades up with a lot of things in the format. So obviously it's going to trade with a lot of the fairies in the format. It trades with Glynhawk. It doesn't get blocked by a lot of like the X3s in the format or X4s, X5s, whatever it is, because they're on the ground. Refurbished Familiar is able to get in over top, be that 2-for-1, and just is better than a lot of the kind of interaction in the format. Heck, against Counterspell, you spend 1 mana against this, Counterspell is a 2-mana spell. You have out-tempoed them. And especially the fact that a lot of the spells you're casting in Affinity are either free or 1, heck, even 2 if you need to. it just means you're always out tempoing those blue players because they're just spending on average more mana than you to stop what you're doing. And then if you manage to resolve this, it's just so much power. I think Grixis Affinity has other tools. We don't need to give it more tools. We can ban Refurbished Familiar. We can notch it down just a bit, and it'll also lose some things in Deadly Dispute, although it will still have other options that are still perfectly serviceable as well. Now, the last card that I think should go in the Pauper format is just going to be the tap bridges. Right? It feels like I'm just running a spiel on Affinity. Now, let me get this straight here. I have been, and still am, an Affinity player since a little bit before 2018 Pauper. I have been playing the format for almost 7 years at this point, a little bit over that. And I've been playing Affinity since the beginning. My love of the artifact lands being legal in the Pauper format is what drew me to the Pauper format. How a broken mechanic like this can actually be used in the Pauper format. And I've seen over time, everything get banned out of Affinity, because at the end of the day, you can break those artifact lands. But I thought we were fine. What really changed was when Modern Horizons 2 printed these bridges. That is when we took it way too far. We are not past this conversation. I think these bridges need to go, because not only do they enable Affinity, one of the reasons that you could stop Affinity was you could always attack their mana base. You had to be ready for Affinity, you had to have artifact and enchantment removal, and the destroy effects were a lot easier to come by than exile effects. Now, having to have exile effects is really problematic. Nowadays, the green decks are playing shuffle effects for the artifacts, the red decks are playing exile effects, but having destroy effects hit the artifact lands were so important. And past that, having their colors now that are indestructible is also problematic. So not only are we not able to use Artifact Monkey to be able to destroy these, or just have any destroy effect manage these, the Affinity decks are not behind on their colors because of stuff like this. Also, outside of Affinity, the Wildfire decks are able to use this as part of their ramp package. They're able to use this as part of fixing. If they're mixing a color, they draw Forage Bridge, tap another land, Wildfire's the draw Forage Bridge, and they get their third basic that they need. The ramp packages are gone. I've gone a little too far. The Jeskai Ephemerate decks haven't been good for a while, and they will probably take a notch down. But I think with the combination of Wildfires and Affinity taking advantage of this too much, with that deck not being held back enough, and just having that long game clock of, yes, I will eventually beat you down. I will not run out of resources. I will always have a way to return my creatures, gain more life, do more damage. I will have a way to overcome this. I think we need to take this down just a little bit. But ultimately, those are my cards that I believe should be banned in the Pauper format. Let me know what you think. Edit your comment down below. Did you change your mind? Is there something I'm missing? Is there something that should be unbanned that I'm not addressing out of the Pauper format? Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. And honestly, at this point, just a waiting game until Monday.